Get started. So again, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us at this evening's webinar. If we could pop to the next slide, and I will get the agenda up so you know exactly how things are going to be run. I'm Amanda Jones, and I'm the Delivery Facilitation Officer for the Good Growth Fund. As I mentioned, we are recording today's event, but we will turn the recording off for the questions and answers, and then we'll circulate a transcript at the end so everyone has a record of what was asked. We have 3 presenters joining us this evening who are going to speak for around 30 minutes, and then we have a 30-minute Q&A. So until we go into the Q&A session, I just ask that you all keep your microphones on mute, and then we will open up the floor for a discussion. And thank you to those that submitted questions ahead of the meeting. We can cover those off as well at the end. We have James, Kirsty and Jim presenting for us from various teams across the Good Growth programme. We're going to speak about the individual funding opportunities available. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to James Glover, our delivery facilitation lead, for the first part of our presentation.
Thanks, Amanda, and yeah, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. So yeah, myself and Amanda are at the front end of the programme, and our role is to help projects kind of come into the process, put in good quality applications and advise you on your ideas, their eligibility, how to get the best chance of success in a kind of competitive process. So I'm just going to talk about an overview of what we can do with shared prosperity funds, and I'll talk about kind of the main part of the programme that we're responsible for, and then I'll go to both Jim and Kirsty for the elements of the programme that they deliver as well, and you'll hear from them on what they can offer you. So yeah, the aims of the Shared Prosperity Fund, it's government's wider commitment to level up all parts of the UK. So this is part of the government's levelling up agenda, and it's also a replacement for previous European programmes. So there's some kind of primary threads that run through the Good Growth programme, and they're on this slide here. So we need to nurture local business and innovation, characterised by growing social and environmental responsibilities. And I'll link that back to parts of the programme that specifically target it, but these are relevant to all parts of the Shared Prosperity Fund we're talking about tonight. Facilitate expansion and increased investment in our green economy and high potential sectors. So this is about low carbon, sustainable growth, and also looking after nature as well through that growth. Empowerment of vibrant communities and a better way of life by creating skills and employment opportunities that will enable everyone to live longer, healthier lives and earn real living wages. So you'll hear me talk about things like the real living wage, which is a priority for the programme, so making sure everyone is paid at that level or above. So what we're trying to do with this programme is leave a lasting legacy for Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, and leave those outcomes that once the programme's closed, there's those benefits that are here for future generations. Next slide, please. So overall, just to give you kind of headline figures, the Cornwall Isles of Scilly total budget is 132 million. That at the moment doesn't include the DEFRA Rural Prosperity Fund, which is an element that will be added to this. That's approximately another 5.6 million. We're just waiting for DEFRA to sign that off, and that will help with both rural businesses and rural communities. So Isles of Scilly will fall within that classification. So when that's live, we're hoping kind of April, May time, we'll be able to talk in more detail, and we'll update our website with that as well. So that's just headline figures there and the breakdown by years. Can I have the next slide, please? So you've heard me talk about those 3 strands that kind of weave through the Shared Prosperity Fund. One is community in place. So this is about people, the communities we serve, and making sure that they can access, you know, high quality living standards. And this is part of the programme contributes towards those aims. Number 2 is support for local businesses and the economy. And then 3 is people and skills. So this is very much about embedding skills both in our people, businesses, community organisations, which will help uplift people's life chances, employability, and also benefit businesses and the local community. Have the next slide, please. So this is what it looks like. So effectively, the main programme you've heard me talk about at the top there, that's what Amanda and myself at the front end of the programme are kind of in charge of delivering, and working with hopefully a number of you that are on this call tonight with your projects that you've been thinking about and want to come into our funding for. So there's the three strands that we have. So effectively we've got the red one, which is the business elements. We've then got the yellow, which is community, and green, which is skills elements, and then the green kind of dotted line, which is the rural element I've just talked about. And then Jim will talk about the community levelling up programme, and Kirsty will talk about the good growth hub. So I don't want to steal their thunder, so I'll leave those to their presentations. So effectively, with the community activity, we divided that into a number of strands. There's kind of numbers and things there, but I think the key thing is that we can fund cultural events. So anything on the Isles of Scilly around that, you've got the international gig rowing championships. Those kind of activities could fit within that cultural events, expanding that. Anything else that brings people onto the islands that would fit with that and kind of bring forward traditions. So that's one area. We've got heritage-led regeneration. So that's looking at preserving, enhancing heritage assets. So it might be repurposing historic buildings on the islands. So again, probably something that may be of interest to people on this call. Community skills hubs. So that's about providing community space, but with very much a focus on skills. So particularly helping people through things like the multiply program, which is part of the skills element below. So people that may have left school without GCSE grade C or level 4 equivalent in maths, and helping them kind of pick up those qualifications in their kind of adult lives and supporting them through that. So there's plenty of things to help people wherever they are kind of in their life, their educational attainment. And then we've got connecting communities. So this is very much about bringing communities together, kind of community activities and cohesion. So again, activities that provide centres, might be food banks, those kind of things, kind of warm cafes, they would all fall within that. And then the final element is mitigating the cost of living. So again, we've kind of linked back to some of the warm spaces, things like that, but equally, offering kind of cooking on a budget classes, how to kind of manage your finances, all those kind of elements would be into that as well. And there's also elements for kind of providing green space. So things like allotments, community gardens, and blue space as well for kind of recreation, well-being. So again, that all falls within those community elements. Within the business element, so this is very much kind of business focused, we've got research, development and innovation. So effectively, this is to help businesses kind of develop innovative products, looking at things like helping with intellectual property, patents, those kind of things. So if you're a business or you're on this call with any kind of innovative ideas in that space, that could be for you. So do make contact, and we'll leave kind of details on how to contact us at the end of this presentation. And there's also some email addresses on this slide as well. Then we've also got business enterprise research and development. So this is very much for businesses that are wishing to grow. If you've got a business that you want to grow into larger premises, you want to go into new products, expand, then again, this could be something that might be of interest to you. I'm giving very much a quick overview, but there's more detail at the Cornwall Isles of Scilly Good Growth website, link in blue at the bottom. If you go there, that's got all our live funding opportunities. Then we've also got strategic sector development. So within the Good Growth programme, there's certain sectors that are designated high priority strategic sectors we want to support. So they include agri-food, tourism, aerospace, tech metals or georesources, so things like lithium mining, etc., and kind of data as well. So those are key elements and priority sectors that we do want to develop, and they obviously link into a lot of other sectors, so some of those are kind of cross-cutting elements. And then we have trade and investment. So this is very much the blue element talks about open invitations and direct delivery. So trade and investment there, we're very much going to look at setting up direct delivery, so an investment program to help Cornish and Isles of Scilly businesses export what they're producing, both nationally but also internationally, but also help with them where you want to import certain goods, services to help your business grow. So again, that's a program that we're setting up, and more details when that's live will be made available on our website. And then Biz 006, which is Town, Rural and High Street Development Fund. This is very much about breathing new life into high streets following the pandemic and kind of changing shopping consumer behaviour. The high streets kind of need to reinvent themselves. So this is looking at, what new offerings, how can high streets be repurposed to breathe new life into them? Are we looking at moving from kind of more a retail environment into a more kind of destination environment? So you've got kind of cafes, experience is other things like that will get people to actually come and visit the high street. So for that, we can help with leases on buildings, kind of converting buildings, that kind of thing, and kind of renovating buildings on high streets or adjacent areas. And then the final one is net zero resilience. So this is helping businesses become more kind of resilient with climate change and move to a lower carbon kind of model. So there's a number of areas there. So there's things to help you kind of reduce your carbon footprint, look at energy efficient measures, but there's also things about preparing for kind of coastal flooding, things like that, as well as inland flooding, and also looking at drought measures as well, which are all basically, it's focusing on those kind of natural resource issues, elements that may impact businesses. So again, that's something that, particularly on the Isles of Scilly, I know there's issues around water, etc., drinking water, potable water, that may be of interest. So do have a look at that. Then just looking at the skills section. And so I've talked about the Multiply program being live. The other things we're currently in the process of kind of commissioning and developing, and then they'll be made live. So at the moment they're under development and likely to be kind of delivered towards the end and early next year. I've talked about the rural program as well, so infrastructure and assets and kind of community development as well there in rural context, which the Isles of Scilly falls within that. So again, when that's live, do see if that fits with your kind of business or your community organisation aspirations. And then I'll just quickly talk about, who is eligible to apply. So you must be a legally constituted organisation. So if you are successful, we can legally contract with you. So you can be from public sector, private sector, community voluntary sector, social enterprises, partnerships, sole traders, limited companies. As long as it's a recognised legal entity, then you can apply. So if there's people on the call that are thinking about a kind of bid from a number of project partners, we would need one of you who's a recognised legal entity to be the kind of lead applicant that we'd contract with. So again, just to think that through. And then, grant rates. So just worth talking that there's different grant rates for each of these funding opportunities, minimum, maximum grant rates, and also intervention rates, a percentage of funding that we can go up to. Some of them may go up to 100%, some of them 80%, some of them lower. So again, full details on our website. And I think the key thing in terms of application deadlines is that we're running funding rounds. So we're currently on the round 3 deadline, which is the next deadline for a number of these live open funding streams, is the 3rd of April. So that's one, and then the next one will be the 4th of August for a number of those. There's some of them which are also fall in between those dates. So again, do look at our website for those full details. Next slide, please. So I've effectively kind of talked through all those elements on the previous slide, but this is just broken down to show you all those funds, the 3 elements that I've talked about: community in place, support for local business, people and skills. But I think it's important to understand the priority outcomes across these programs. So in return for putting in a grant application and seeking public funding, we are expecting program targets, outputs to be delivered by your project. So there's various kind of targets, and there's different funding streams have different targets. But overall, what we're looking for is increased skill level in the workforce. So creating higher paid kind of jobs with good career progression, that's important. But you can create just normal jobs or kind of average jobs that are providing the real living wage. That's acceptable, but we are looking for that step change in behaviour through the project, so what we call additionality. So by getting the grant funding, you're going to lead to a significant increase in what you're able to deliver. So we want to increase the average wage in Cornwall and Isles of Scilly, so that's done through the real living wage, which is mentioned below as well. We want to help people with their connectivity to work, training and skills through these programmes. We've also got some other elements coming through around green travel, so helping people kind of travel to work, stay healthy, those kind of things. So that's around cycle paths, footpaths. So there's lots in there to support a number of these measures. We talked about levelling up towns and neighbourhoods. You know, this is very much about that bottom-up approach for leadership and devolution. So it's about looking at, you know, communities agreeing and deciding what they want and then taking those forward. So it really is looking to yourselves on this call. What does your community need? What do your businesses need? And then please do engage with us and we can help you through the grant process. So we've also talked about, helping numeracy and literacy, productivity of businesses as well. So that's why we've got our RD&I. So, you know, Cornwall has some of the lowest RD&I kind of investment figures in England. So we're very keen that Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly have that extra support to help address that, and yourselves can grow your businesses. We've talked about export and inward investment, helping make that a key to economic growth as well. We've also talked about reduction in CO2 emissions. So look, what we're looking for is sustainable growth as well. So if you're going to grow your business, how do you do it sustainably? If you're going to move into larger premises, can you include renewable energies to help lower your electricity bill through solar panels? Can you rainwater harvest to use the water for flushing your toilets? All those kind of things built into your new project. And then, we've talked about reduction in the healthy life expectancy gap. So that's again making sure that everyone, regardless of socioeconomic background, does have that equal opportunity and a good life expectancy. And then nature recovery, which is key to obviously helping nature improve, but also helping then humans have a better experience and an interaction. Next slide, please. So I've talked about who can apply. So it's any organisation with legal status can receive funding to deliver one of our funding streams. And as we said, you must make a positive contribution to good growth as outlined in our Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Good Growth Investment Plan. So again, that investment plan is on the website. That's the overarching funding document that sets out how the Shared Prosperity Fund will be spent in Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. So I think that covers kind of the main elements. I've talked about cross-cutting kind of themes and threads that go throughout. And I think the final thing is just to talk about the good growth principles that do underpin all of this. So we've talked about, there's 3 principles that do link to all of this. So that is clean and green. So that's about nature recovery, the environment and net zero. So managing carbon emissions and equivalent. We've got the business and economy element about growing a sustainable businesses and the economy. And then finally, we've got equality, diversity and inclusion. So making sure that what projects do isn't just kind of standard normal practice, it goes above and beyond. So what can you do to make sure you've got the most diverse workforce, you've got the most flexible work patterns, because not only will that help you attract employees, it will help you retain them, and also that will then help your productivity and profitability of your business as well. And because the good growth principles are so important for all projects, and need to address them and show that there's going to be a significant change in your business or your organisation through your project, and hit those 3 elements of the good growth principles. We're running webinars in partnership with Exeter University. So those webinars, we've got two that are remaining, and we've got one on the 13th and one on the 22nd of March. And I'm sure colleagues, I haven't looked at the chat, but I'm sure colleagues in the background can pop the link into the chat if people are interested in going on those, because those will show you how to embed those principles into your project application. And I think next slide, and I think that's on to my colleague. So I'll hand over to Kirsty. Thanks, Kirsty.
Thanks, James. Apologies if I've suddenly got a frog in my throat, so if I start to cough or I'll have a bit of water, so just bear with me. So yeah, thank you very much, James. My name's Kirsty Miles-Musgrave, and I am the Hub Operations Manager, currently working with the Isles of Scilly Growth and Skills Hub. So we are a European funded project. We're contracted until the summer to be delivering business support or helping businesses to access business support and training opportunities across Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. And the idea is that through the Good Growth Fund, there'll be a seamless transition from the current European funded project of the Growth and Skills Hub into what we're calling the Good Growth Hub. So that will be further funding for 2 years moving forward. And the idea being that it's, as I said, it's a seamless transition between what we have at the moment and the next one. And ideally, the principles of what we're delivering is remaining the same. So the third bullet point there on the slide is around that single point of contact. And that's what the Growth and Skills Hub offer at the moment and will continue to offer. So businesses can come to us with their growth ambitions, their plans. We talk to them about the challenges and the opportunities that their businesses are facing. And then we do the legwork to find what support they can access to help them achieve what they want to do with their business, essentially. We're doing that at the moment. We take the hassle out of understanding what's out there. Businesses don't want to visit 25 different websites and ring 5 different organisations to find out maybe if they can get support. So that's the service that we're running at the moment, and that's the service that the Good Growth Hub will continue to provide. The slight change in that is that obviously they will be able to access the Shared Prosperity Fund and the Good Growth funded support and grants, which I'll talk to you about in a moment. So the Growth Hub is sort of impartial and independent. So we don't have to deliver particular outputs we don't have to signpost people to particular organisations. It's very bespoke, and it's pretty much bespoke to each of the individual businesses that come and talk to us. And as I said, we do the legwork to find the support that your business needs. And we directly refer people into support opportunities and also signpost to others, and we help you choose your priorities as well. So if there's lots of opportunities that your businesses are facing and have the chance to take advantage of, it's about helping you decide which are the priorities for your business. And also it's sort of that critical friend. So you might come to us with a funding requirement, for instance, but what we do is we look at your business in the round as a whole, and then look at all the opportunities and challenges that you're facing and make sure that if there is a funding opportunity for you, it's the right one, or whether actually you need to take a step back and think about different ways of looking at your business before you take advantage of funding and things like that. And the one thing I would say is that the feedback we get at the moment is that conversation with us, that we call it a business review, is actually really helpful and is sometimes as helpful as the support that you might access moving forward. So it's that opportunity, as I said, it's that fresh eyes, that critical friend, the opportunity. I hate this phrase, but it's very apt. It's working on the business rather than in the business. It's taking that time, that stepping back to think about what you can access. So that is what the Good Growth Hub moving forward will continue to offer. So that's the similarities to what we're doing at the moment. But there are also some key differences as we move from the European funded project to the Good Growth funded project. So some of those similarities are on that slide there. So, oh, sorry, can we just go backwards? Back one. A bit enthusiastic there. So some of the differences there you will see is that all sectors are eligible for support and the grants. Some of you may be aware that the European funding has some eligibility criteria, and some specific sectors were ineligible for European funded support. That's not the case with Shared Prosperity. So all organisations, all sectors, all kinds of businesses are available or have the opportunity to apply for Good Growth. And also it's not sort of size dependent. So the European funded support is targeted at small to medium enterprises, so that's organisations employing less than 250 people. Again, Shared Prosperity does not have that eligibility criteria, so it has all sizes and shapes of businesses can apply. However, there are certain focuses, as James mentioned. There are some specific sectors and some specific activity that we want to target, and I'll talk about that in a moment. The other area that James also mentioned is around those good growth principles. So through the Good Growth Hub, through the business support that we'll be offering, we'll be looking for businesses that not only have their ambition to grow and to scale up, but also want to improve that, improve their environmental sustainability and also social responsibility. And as I don't want to go over too much what James has already said, but just to give you an example about what we talk about from a business point of view about environmental sustainability, that might be, as James said, about a reduction in CO2. We're also looking at circularity. So that's, some of you may have come across the circular economy before. So that's reducing the use of raw materials and also increasing the recycling of waste. So how we reduce the waste in business processes. And also nature recovery. So how would your business be protecting the our current natural spaces, but also maybe reinstating some of those as well? So that's examples of what some of the environmental sustainability you might be looking for. Social responsibility examples about creating opportunities for people with disabilities or ill health. So again, that goes back to what James saying about sort of equality in recruitment and looking at diversifying your workforce. And again, looking at how we support the ageing population to remain economically active, and also things like reducing the gender pay gap. So James mentioned about those growth principles, and to access the SPF, the Shared Prosperity funded support and grants, your business will have to demonstrate how they are supporting one or a number of those growth principles. So the other thing to note, James also mentioned about commissioned business support. So the Good Growth Hub will be there to understand your business, your challenges, your opportunities, your growth ambitions. And then we will be looking at some of the support that will be funded by the Good Growth Fund, but also outside of that as well. So we're looking at national opportunities, some other opportunities locally as well. So it's the full spectrum. Good Growth Fund will also be commissioning some specific business support, and that's being processed at the moment. So in addition to grant funding, there will also be business support available. And again, it's likely to be under some of the focus areas that I'm about to talk about. So if we can jump onto the next slide now, please. Brilliant. So the Good Growth grants, some of you may well be aware that we had a short round of funding in February, so that closed on the 24th of February, and those grants focused on these areas, and moving forward the grants will continue to focus on these areas. So even though the current funding has closed now, moving forward the funding will be in these areas as well, so it's important to cover some of these. So I talked about we will be focusing on some specific sectors particularly, and you can see a couple of those there. So manufacturing is one of the areas that will have specific grant funding, and also the social economy. So when we talk about that, I'm talking about community interest companies, social enterprises, registered charities. So there'll be some specific funding for businesses and organisations in that particular sector. And the manufacturing, we might be looking, for instance, for new or improved products or services. So businesses that are looking to bring something new or to make something new, or also to introduce new technology or processes to their business as well. Export. So James mentioned about the trade and investment. There will be grants that will be available alongside that commission support, and that's about helping people to access new markets. And that could be domestic markets, so reaching new markets in the UK under certain circumstances, or international markets as well. Or it could be increasing your existing capacity to export. And that can be things like how to develop an export strategy, or maybe doing some market research to investigate where you can actually start to export your existing business, your existing products or services, or things like attendance at trade shows. So they include things like that. There's also feasibility studies in there. It's easy to assume that means capital projects. So that means that if I want to build a building, I'm going to need to do a feasibility study to find out how much it's going to cost and that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be like that. So it could be if you're looking for a new opportunity, a new venture for your business, but you need to de-risk that by investigating the feasibility of entering into a new venture. There's funding for that as well. Okay, so if you want to move on to the next slide, we're also looking, as James said, to really support research, development and innovation. So there'll be some of these areas to look at for the grants as well. And that, again, is things like market research to identify new opportunities, legal consultancy advice, things like tax credit advice, intellectual property, that kind of thing. And again, visit to trade shows. It's about projects that could include third-party contractors. So if you're looking to bring somebody else into your business to help you to develop that innovation, that area is there as well. And also things like infrastructure, so IT networks or computer equipment, 3D printers, cloud-based services, that kind of thing that will actually help your business to develop some of that research and development and innovation. And also in years 2 and 3, so moving into talking about that transition from the current offer into the new offer, there'll be some support for grants around net zero as well. So how you can help your business to become carbon neutral and support that ambition that Cornwall has to be carbon neutral by, I think it's 2050. Somebody might, or is it 2030? Somebody might confirm that for me. So the other thing to realise is, particularly in the grants, but also for the support as well, this isn't about business as usual. So if you have some kit that's wearing out and you need to replace it, that's not what these grants are for. These grants are for a step change for your business. So introducing something new to the business, whether that's a new product or service, whether that's a new process or a new bit of technology, it's about helping your business to move forward and to grow rather than the business as usual. So that's important to note. And also that there are outcomes and outputs attached to all of this support. So the grants and also the access to the commission support as well. So as James said, to benefit from the support or from this funding, we're asking you to deliver an output or an outcome. And that could be things like job creation. It could be, as I've said, introducing a new technology or a new process within your business. It could be launching a new product or service. There's also about increases in productivity and as I said, employment growth. There's all sorts of outputs available for you to choose from. But as I said, there are some requirements to be able to access the support and the grants. And we mentioned about match funding. I think that was one of the questions that was submitted ahead of time. So the grants that we were advertising previously required a 50% match. And the likelihood is that will be moving forward into the next grant funding as well. So that's something to remember, that there is match funding required for all of these business grants. We're probably looking at about 50% match funding. And the other thing to remember is that it is from the business point of view, this isn't the case for the wider Good Growth Fund, is actually it's retrospective funding. So you will need to be able to cash flow the project. So for instance, if you were applying, if you had a £50,000 project and you were applying for a £25,000 grant, you would need to be able to cash flow that £50,000, prove that you had delivered the project, and then you would claim that £25,000 back. I think also there was a question previously submitted about what if you were waiting for a loan? Now, I know in the round of funding that's just closed, we were allowing people to submit their applications with pending for loans, commercial mortgages, that kind of thing, or applications for other funding. But obviously what you wouldn't be able to do is confirm that that offer. You wouldn't get the grant offer until your match funding was actually in place. So hopefully that helps to cover some of the other queries as well. And then finally, I'm sure everyone's wondering when the next grants in these areas are going to be available. So that's being worked through at the moment, but the likelihood is that the next rounds of funding will be available probably from late spring. So that's all from me, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague Jim to talk to you about community levelling up.
Okay, thanks very much, Kirsty. Good evening, everybody. I'm conscious of the time, so I will try and move through these reasonably quickly. If we can have the Next slide, please. Thank you. So you saw from James's summary earlier on that there was that yellow box over on the left-hand side. That's the Community Levelling Up programme, a strand of shared prosperity in Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. We've had round one already, so that went, and there was a lot of interest in it. What we're talking about now is round two, which is effectively covering years 2 and 3. So this is, as you can see there, a start date of May this year, running through to the end of March 2025. So the advantage with this second round is there is a longer time scale to get your projects accepted and delivered. So in summary, what's Community Levelling Up all about? Well, it's to help communities in Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly to develop place-shaping ambitions, and through locally led delivery and increased levels of community facilitation, empower them to drive the necessary changes they need for their future. So it absolutely plays to the whole national Community Levelling Up agenda. Activities could include, but this is absolutely by no means an exhaustive list, it's just some suggestions, some ideas if you like. Refurbishing, repurposing, renovating, creating new buildings on high streets and neighbourhood shopping areas to help deliver increased footfall, increased economic activity and improved pride in place. Funding for new or improvements to existing community and neighbourhood infrastructure projects that deliver improved public realm and economic regeneration. And then another example, engagement schemes to support community involvement in decision making and local regeneration. And as I say, those are just sort of broad examples. And in round one, we had a lot of projects that you could say fairly directly fitted one of those, but we also had a lot of very interesting and innovative projects that were addressing really sort of different aspects of levelling up and were absolutely equally valid and eligible. Now, the budget under this strand for the whole of Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, important to stress that, is a total of 9.28 million, as you can see top right there. The initial budget for the Isles of Scilly is £52,000. Now, that doesn't sound a great deal, but a really important point, this is a very important point to get across, is that there is a large sum of money, over £3 million, in a performance reserve, which will be kept in place during this programme. And if projects in one particular area, for example, the Isles of Scilly, use up the 52,000 in your case, then you are absolutely entitled to bid into the performance reserve. Decisions as to how that will be spent will be made by the Economic Prosperity Board that manages this programme overall. It's important just to step sideways for a moment to explain that there will be, for round two, 13 community area partnerships across Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, so 12 on the mainland, and then effectively one that covers the Isles of Scilly. And each of these will be working to a framework, and this is quite a big change from round one of Community Levelling Up. So there will now be a framework driving the priorities for each of these 13 areas. So obviously there'll be a framework covering the Isles of Scilly. So it's an important point to get across, is that any project you're thinking about really has to address the priorities of that published framework in due course. And again, it's very important to engage with the facilitator. There will be one that will be allocated to the Isles of Scilly, and he or she will be able to guide you as to how well your project fits with the framework, and possibly any changes or tweaks you might need to make. And again, those of you that looked at round one of Community Levelling Up will remember that you could just look at the Cornwall Council webpage for Community Levelling Up, and on there were the set of application forms and guidance notes for, as it was, 2 sets of projects size scale, either under £80,000 grant or over £80,000 grant. There's again a difference now in round 2, in that you won't be able to access the application forms until you've put in that expression of interest to this process and spoken to your facilitator, who will then, if everybody agrees it's an eligible project, will be able to signpost you to the application forms. So it's just a way of managing the projects coming into the programme and the prioritisation of those. Scale of the grant, as you can see on the right hand side there, it's still going to be, as for round one, a maximum normally of £200,000, a minimum of £5,000. So it's a nice broad range of scale. You can be doing a very small grant project or quite a big one. However, a difference this time again, as it says below there, with a bit of negotiation and discussion and justification, it might be possible to have a grant that's below the 5,000. So, say 4,750 or something like that. Equally, possibly a grant that's a little above the maximum, 220,000, maybe something like that, if the project really justifies it and it's going to provide good outputs and outcomes for the investment from the programme. So this time those award limits are not absolutely cast in stone. It is up to a point potentially negotiable. Next slide, please. So I've said a little bit about the frameworks. Each community area partnership, and obviously we're talking about the Isles of Scilly as one here, has been supported to develop a local good growth delivery framework that we use to target delivery in the areas. So any project coming forward, as I stressed before, must contribute to the relevant framework. And dedicated Isles of Scilly facilitation support will be available to help applicants to drive projects through the process. So they'll be there to support you all the way and ensure that funds reach areas of Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly that may not have benefited from funding previously. And as before, as with round one, capital and/or revenue funds are available. So it's important to think about the scope of the projects to maximise the impact. For example, if you're doing a capital project, you might not have thought whether you actually want funding for maybe a project manager to deliver the project or work with the professional team working on the project, something like that. So just have a think about the scope of the project and whether a mix of capital and revenue would work, or whether it definitely is just a revenue project or just a capital project. All of those are perfectly okay, perfectly valid. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I think I mentioned earlier on, applications will open in May this year and probably, as it says TBC there, probably close in December next year. So that still gives you a decent window to get projects in. I think you can tell already from some of the things I've said that the detail for years 2 and 3 delivery has been informed, it says will be, but already is being informed by lessons learned from year 1 and the local good growth delivery frameworks. That's the new additional part of this process now. Now, in May 2023, 60% of the available budget, the 9 million we talked about, will be allocated to each of the areas and the Isles of Scilly, and then 40% will be retained in the performance reserve that I mentioned. The budget in each area will vary, so it won't be the same amount of money going to each of the 13 areas, to take into account the different scales and geographic coverage of each of the areas. There's a kind of formula that is being used to determine what the size of the budget is, the initial budget, I should say, for each of the areas. And as I said before, each of the areas, including the Isles of Scilly, is absolutely free to attempt to tap into the performance reserve once the budget's been used up, hence the bold there. As James and Kirsty have already said, any legally constituted organisation can apply, the same sort of range of organisations that James and Kirsty have talked about before. And then, as with round 1, outputs and outcomes are required. For example, square meters of public realm improved or created. And the definition of public realm is reasonably broad if you look at the guidance. Improved perception of community facilities, economic benefit, and of course, you know, as with the rest of the strands, we're looking for those environmental benefits, nature benefits, that kind of thing. And often those can be built into a project that people haven't really thought about. So it's something to keep in mind. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so I think that's a little bit of a canter through the Levelling Up programme, but Community Levelling Up programme, but I'm very conscious of time and we want to allow sufficient time for questions. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Kirsty. That's been great, and hopefully that's given you a flavour. Obviously, in the time allowed, we've kind of given you a high-level flavour, but you've probably got a number of questions. So what we'll do, because it's kind of a relatively kind of small